I mean, we have an election coming up. If you would be in the position to give advice to the coming Prime Minister, what would your advice be concerning the welfare state? Yes.
Yeah, well, I'd start the reforms to abolish it. I think one of the most important reforms I start with is opt-out measures. That you could choose the welfare services. We shouldn't mend what's already working. But for those wishing otherwise, there should be an opt-out measures. That if you want to pay for an education for your child by your own means, that should be deductible. You shouldn't be made to pay twice for your children. And the same thing with healthcare, the same thing with pension schemes and everything. You should create opt-out. That would mean that the most reform you would see would be in the sectors not working well today. And this would provide the dynamics for that has been totally missing. I mean, we have decades and decades and decades of state welfare system, and they're working all right, and we're proud of the heritage. We're not mentioning too much about the eugenics and other things that followed with them. But they haven't developed. We haven't seen anything like the creativity and development we have seen in commercial sectors. If these would be just ordinary services with people competing about doing the best they could, I can't really see how this would be worse than the situation today. But let's keep it and have an opt-out clause instead of just trying to abolish it for everyone all at once, trying to build a new society.
And what would your advice be, Eric?
Yeah, I would say that first of all, the idea of from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs is not such a bad idea. But who is providing it is not so important. The thing is that people need to get what they need, what they request for. I believe that there should be. I mean, we in Sweden we love utredningar. What's the word in English?
Investigations.
Investigations, deep down going, big bureaucracy. And somehow it should always be that the question on the government's table should be, what are the states supposed to do? What's the purpose with the state? What are we here to provide today? Because we talk a lot about the core of the welfare, but we are so indifferent to what is the core. I mean, me and Matthias have completely different ideas about the core of the welfare. But the issue has to be discussed at all times, so that the state is doing the right thing and not stepping into areas where it's not necessary for the state to be, or where there is no request for the state to be.
But I would really get the state out of the core, because that's the most important part.
James, what would you tell the English Prime Minister?
What would I tell him? I think one difficulty might be that it's really not in his gift to resolve the problem. That's one difficulty we have. And that were I to advise him, he wouldn't recognise the problem that I see, if you like. I think that there's two sides to this. One is that the political structure of the UK is now grounded and legitimated through a certain understanding of what we as citizens are. And that's the basis upon which the modern enabling state has been built, that we need these kinds of interventions in our lives. I think it's very unlikely that David Cameron or Nick Clegg or anyone else in politics is likely to be able to recognise the need to fundamentally dismantle the welfare state. I'd certainly be less interested, I think, in opt-out clauses and those kinds of issues, because again, what we're looking at there is the financial problem of welfareism. And I'd be far more interested, certainly, in, as both of you guys have suggested, launching a proper debate about what kind of public social provisions we think we want and need, and what kind of institutions we think are best to do those. But I think that's not a question for politicians. That's a question that we need to begin to engage in far more seriously. And it may be that there are certain areas of what is now the welfare state that we would want to keep. I certainly think it would be a very good idea, my political prejudices are such, that it would be a very good idea to have a decent public education system, to have a decent public health system which provides healthcare for people at the point of need. But that's not what the healthcare system is now oriented to do. It's far more oriented towards moralising towards people in their daily lives in terms of how they live their lifestyles, assuming that they can take control of their life. And it's that underlying assumption that we really need to pick up and challenge. And that, I think, is something that we can only do in our own lives, both as individuals, but also by coming together to actually start challenging this very diminished understanding of what we're capable of. And I think certainly starting to dismantle large sections of the welfare state would be a very good start, precisely because it would encourage and force us to begin to actually really rethink what kind of provisions we want and what kind of provisions we think a decent society in the future should provide for us.
Let me finish with one last question. You have studied the welfare state way back and up to now. What do you think will happen with the welfare state within 10 years? Matthias?
Well, I think on the positive side, I think it will move towards being actual pragmatic services because people as acting as customers have much higher expectations now, and this must boost quality and will also get one way or the other money flowing this way, because people want safety for themselves and for their kin, and also in society at large, rather than the bigger television screen. I really think this is a really strong preference in all kinds of societies. On the bad thing, I think also we will see an expansion of meddling and trying to win votes from politics by exploring new areas, making new promises about the welfare state, expanding rather than looking to the main core quality, because it's not that glamorous having an already working health hospital or something, but it is glamorous to promise a new reform, some new idea, and so on. So I think much money will be wasted on that.
Erik?
Yeah, I believe that the welfare system, and especially in Sweden now, in our situation, is a very much of a self-going machine. It's 10 years is far too short time to really get to the problem and change some things, if it doesn't crack down totally by financial reasons, for example. So I believe that we are going into more and more of what Brendan said about moralistic. The state is moralistic over the people, how we live our lives, what we are doing, and it comes in so many areas. And I believe that we will, within these 10 years, see the people rise up and say, this is not what the state is supposed to do. We are grown-ups and capable of ourselves creating our lives, our future. We didn't get the welfare society from our as an heritage for someone to tell us how to live our lives. We got the welfare society to be free to create our lives ourselves. So I think we will see in 10 years, within 10 years, that people will rise up and say it's enough now, enough.
James?
Well, I mean, I certainly hope we don't move more in the direction, to disagree a bit with Matthias, of becoming more customers and consumers of welfare, because it's not clear to me that I get a better healthcare system by being able to choose between a range of different artificial limb providers when I've lost a limb, or a range of different cancer drug providers when I've got cancer. What I actually want is quality healthcare. It's straightforward. And I am, however, quite optimistic. I mean, I think we have entered and are entering a very new kind of political period, one that allows us to move beyond, I think, the rather redundant language of the past, and to actually start working out what kind of society we want for the future. As I've said, my pessimism comes in at the level that I don't think politicians have really caught on to that fact, that they talk a bit of rhetoric about it, but they don't actually understand what it means. So I think anything that happens beneficially over the next while is going to be a result of us really coming together and working far harder to have those discussions about what kind of society we want to live in. I'm optimistic and see many signs of the fact that not only are we capable of doing that, as you suggested, but that people are already beginning to do that. And I think the role for any of us who are concerned about these issues is to try and draw some of those connections and draw the dots and provide some kind of framework within which people can actually begin to assert themselves as more free, if you like, individuals who can actually start determining what kind of services and what kind of provisions they like. So if we leave it to the politicians, I think one would have to be very pessimistic. I actually think there's no reason to do that, and we can begin to forge a far more decent kind of society.
Last word?
One kind of revolution I think we will see in the coming 10 years is that people just go abroad and shop around for solutions to different welfare problems. We see it in teeth already, we see it in certain kind of operations, and this will grow and create a more pragmatic. People will just solve things for themselves in more and more areas, and I think this will just grow. So while we're having a discussion on what to do with the Swedish welfare workers in India, in the Baltic states and otherwise, they will provide solutions even for us. That will be a reality.
Mattias Svensson, Eric Laxo, James Crampton, thank you for coming. Thank you for talking. Stay